know Fire Emblem 6, right? Yeah, of course, that's the Binding Blade, the game that stars one of the most popular lords in the series, and the very first entry on the Game Boy Advance. However, the Binding Blade could have looked a lot different. In fact, if things had gone to plan, it could have been released on the Nintendo 64. This is the story of Fire Emblem and Koku no Miko. In May of 1996, Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War was released to the public on the Super Famicom. But by 1996, the Super Famicom was old news. The next generation of gaming had already arrived, and everything was now in 64 bits. Nintendo and Fire Emblem had not caught up. Nintendo would eventually come around a few months later with the release of the Nintendo 64, but it seemed like Shouzou Kaga had no intentions of catching up at all. After Genealogy's release, fans asked him if the next Fire Emblem game would be on the new Nintendo 64 hardware. Kaga strongly denied this, saying that the Super Famicom would do just fine for the next game. Additionally, he mentioned that the fifth Fire Emblem would be a return to Arcanea,
as you say,
and much more difficult.
My prayers are with you!
And that's all that was said about the franchise for about a year. The next time fans heard anything about the series was in September of 1997, when Mario series creator Shigeru Miyamoto confirmed that development for a Fire Emblem game on the Nintendo 64 had begun. He stated that Fire Emblem 5 would come out in the latter half of 1998 after the release of Paper Mario. In 1998, only the title of the game was revealed. The game was to be called Koku no Miko, or Maiden of Darkness. Then, things got quiet for another year. Kaga announced that his Arcanea project had failed due to the limitations of the Super Famicom. He refocused his efforts into making
Thracia 776,
a game within the usual universe instead of Arcanea. Kaga stated that he would like Thracia to be ported to the Nintendo 64, but still, no news on Koku no Miko. Later in 1999, Thracia 776 was released, and Shouzou Kaga left Intelligent Systems after almost 10 years of making games for the company. His reasons for leaving are still unknown to this day. Following Kaga's departure, development for Koku no Miko completely halted on the Nintendo 64. Without the series' lead developer, how could they make a game of such a grand scale? Development was shifted to the Game Boy Advance by the year 2000, and the whole game had to be rebuilt from the ground up. This is the only known image of Fire Emblem and Koku no Miko, and later it would be completely reworked into what fans now know as Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade. Kaga's reasons for leaving Intelligent Systems may be officially unknown, but there's always some room for good old speculation. Let's look at the facts. Kaga left Intelligent Systems after the release of Thracia 776 in 1999. Fire Emblem 64 was apparently delayed multiple times due to problems in development. These problems were apparently so bad that it affected the release of another game. After Kaga's departure, almost everything about Koku no Miko was scrapped in favor of what we got in The Binding Blade. Kaga was initially strictly against releasing games on the Nintendo 64, even going as far as to use a 4th generation video game console during the 5th generation era. So, using these facts, I put together a possible situation divulging why exactly Kaga left Intelligent Systems. Remember, this situation is in fact. Now, let's continue. When IS approached Kaga about making another Fire Emblem game, Kaga responded with his plans for his Arcanea project.
Together.
Intelligent Systems didn't like this since it didn't include the newest technology on the market.
I refuse to yield!
Intelligent Systems reluctantly agreed to let Kaga go ahead with his Arcanea project, only on the condition that he also be a part of the Koku no Miko team.
As you say.
Kaga reluctantly agreed. Due to the conflict between Kaga and Intelligent Systems, development for both Koku no Miko and the Arcanea project didn't go so well. Kaga was willing to save his Arcanea project because he cared about it, but he wasn't willing to save Koku no Miko. No longer agreeing with the way Intelligent Systems wanted the series to continue, Kaga decided to make Thracia 776, the game that he actually cared about, his last hurrah. Kaga decided to leave Intelligent Systems so that he could make the games that he wanted to. This proposed conflict between Kaga and IS would also explain why Kaga hasn't really commented on the Fire Emblem series since leaving. But hey, that's just a theory. Since the game was ultimately scrapped, we don't know much about the setting, plot, or gameplay of Ankoku no Miko. However, Kaga did divulge a little bit about the characters in the making of Fire Emblem 25th Anniversary book. The main character of the game was to be Roy, but he was not the same boy that we know today. This is Beta Roy, or as he was known in early development, Ike. The name Ike was of course reused for the protagonist of the Teleus duology. Idun was the given name of one character. Of course, this Idun bears no resemblance to the Idun that eventually existed in The Binding Blade. In the one screenshot provided of the game, it's revealed that the character on the left here had the name of Ephraim, which later became the name of the Lord from Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones. In text files, it was found that Beta Ephraim had a father, and his father's name was Eliwood. In The Binding Blade, Eliwood became the main character Roy's father instead.
I'd like to get to know you better.
The name Owain was also found in text files, and later became the name of the child unit from Fire Emblem Awakening.
Ah, if it isn't the hero champion! Brave master? No, brave champion!
This one is most likely coincidence, because Owain is not the Japanese name of the Awakening character. Karel is the only character from Ankoku no Miko that wasn't changed or rewritten for The Binding Blade. He's been an edgy sword boy since day one. More designs were shown in the book, but these characters did not receive names. And this is the only information that we know about Ankoku no Miko. Since we don't know much about it, it's hard to say what we would have gained if the game had been released. However, we do know what we would have lost if development had not stopped on Ankoku no Miko. Either way, we would have gotten Thracia 776. Kaga was intent on making one last game for the Super Nintendo, and development of FE64 and FE5 were happening simultaneously. If things had gone to plan, we would not have gotten Binding Blade, and as a result of this, we wouldn't have gotten Blazing Blade either.
I don't back down!
In fact, Ankoku no Miko could have possibly been the game that quote-unquote almost killed the series. It was planned for the Nintendo 64 disk drive, which was a failed add-on to the Nintendo 64 hardware. Nobody really bought the Nintendo 64 DD, and as a result, nobody would have bought Ankoku no Miko either. Thracia was, and still is, the poorest selling game in the franchise, and to follow that with another commercial failure could have been really troublesome. Well, thankfully, history did not happen that way, and we got a mildly successful hit in The Binding Blade and an overseas hit with Blazing Blade. Roy would have likely still made it into Smash Bros. In his Ankoku no Miko form, since Masahiro Sakurai was, and still is, a huge Fire Emblem fan. Whether or not Ankoku Roy would have gained as much popularity as Binding Roy is hard to say, but people would have been interested either way. Smash fans were basically interested in this cool anime boy from a series they've never heard of, and they would have gotten that no matter what. There is so little information on Ankoku no Miko as a game. Will we ever hear more? It's possible. Fire Emblem is celebrating its 30th anniversary soon, and who knows what we'll hear this time. But from what we know now, it is really interesting to think that the most popular characters in the franchise could have been completely changed if history had happened a little bit differently.